All right, thank y'all for being here. My name is Rudy Semino, Chief Engineer at CPRA. Welcome to the 2024 Coastal Industry Day CPRA-led project forecast. Happy to be facilitating this session again this year. This is we started in 2013, so this is our 11th edition. And each year, I think we get more and more projects, and we have more and more to talk about. So for the sake of time, we are going to try to start right at 3 p.m. and opening remarks, I'll keep it pretty brief. We are in a pretty historic period of CPRA. We have a record annual plan of over $1.7 billion in spending. Nearly 80% of that goes to construction, and predominantly that's what we're here to talk about today. A lot of our construction forecast, upcoming bids. We do have a couple other things to talk about. We'll have the Louisiana Workforce Commission come up in a little bit. And then we'll talk a little bit about professional services and consultant services contracts on the back end. So a lot of hard work goes into putting this together every year. A lot of the presenters are in the room, CPRA staff, mostly a few of our consultant teams are here as well. So I'd like to thank them personally for putting forth the hard work and not just the presentations, but the work that goes into the projects that we're presenting. And then I also want to thank Jacques Boudreau, who's kind of the ringleader here on getting everything organized and getting us all set up in this room. And he'll be our MC for today. So with that, Jacques, I'll turn it over to you. And if you want to give us the ground rules, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks, Rudy. Yeah, appreciate everybody coming out today. As Rudy said, we got a lot of good work to present upon. In fact, I was just listening over to the governor's press release, and we're just we're applauding our annual plan, showing all the construction-oriented projects that we have. And really, this room, what we're here to talk about in this room today, is just a testament to how all that work is manifested itself. With regard to just some logistics and housekeeping, I am putting in some information into the chat box. I'm giving you my email address as well as a general email address for the organization for CPRA for any general inquiries. Excuse me. For any project related or project forecast related questions, what I'd like for you to do for those of you who are in attendance virtually is we're going to have you put those into the chat box. And then just for the sake of conducting question and answer periods efficiently here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take questions from in the room first. And if you look here towards the front of the room, I've got these two mics here. They are actually live right there. And there's little death pins that are shown right next to the mics. You can put them up and you can introduce yourself and you can repeat you can say your question aloud. I can repeat them for those who are in attendance virtually, and we can field them like that. Also for the virtual questions, we'll be monitoring those throughout via the Zoom chat box. With that, we're gonna go ahead and start off today's construction project forecast. As Rudy mentioned, the first presenter is going to be Lisa Williams from the Louisiana Workforce Commission.
Am I clicking or are you? Am I clicking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which one? Emma?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Williams, and I'm one of the directors for the Louisiana Workforce Commission, Office of Workforce Development. And so I'm here just to share some information on coastal workforce development. And so Louisiana Workforce Commission, of course, our mission and aim is to put people back to work. And within the coastal industry sector, we're seeking to engage with coastal stakeholders to better understand the coastal workforce challenges and to provide solutions for workforce development within the industry. And so we have several partnerships currently, which include technology, Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, CPRA, LWC and CPRA, we do have an MOU, and the MOU is to help us facilitate those contractors or stakeholders that are contractors or working in the industry and to help them gain compliance with the Louisiana First Hiring Act. And I'll share some more about that. LWC also has a partnership with Coursera, and we're looking to work with CTAC, who is another one of our partners, to assist us in finding if there are any areas where we can upskill or better develop those who are interested in any coastal workforce development careers or any upskilling of any current skills they have. And then also, some of our partners are the Louisiana Local American Job Centers, Workforce Development Boards, and then the Louisiana Community Colleges and Technical Systems, Coastal Companies and Contractors, and Louisiana Coastal Zone Residents. And so I did speak about the Louisiana First Hiring Act. That act was enacted legislatively in 2012 to strengthen the coastal economy. It is to require coastal businesses to conduct certain activities to recruit and hire coastal zone residents. The act positions coastal resident job seekers to apply for jobs relative to CPRA coastal and related projects. And so the MOU was created to be able to assist those who did receive CPRA contracts to achieve compliance. So the legislation wasn't created to catch anyone up, but it was created to help enable our Louisiana residents and those citizens that are in coastal areas to not be overlooked when large projects come in. And so not to bring in companies over them, on top of them, and for them to be able to get a legitimate shot at working in an area where they live. And so what we do is we work to assist coastal employers or contractors create and post job positions in the hire system, as well as if they needed to do recruiting events. One of my units, that's something that we do. We do recruiting events. We can help with marketing, awareness campaigns, sharing information, because sometimes it's just a matter of people don't know that you exist, or they know you exist, but don't know fully what you do and the role that they could play in what you do. And so then there's a link, and Jock is going to share the PowerPoint presentation. There's a link that shows you what the Louisiana First Hiring Act is. And so they're going to cover the overview, but we do work off of the coastal projects hot list that is provided on the link on the website of CPRA. We do use that, and those are the contractors that we do contact, and we give them the information that's necessary for them to be in compliance, as well as to assist them with the compliance and with actually gaining employees. And so we recognize that there are some hiring challenges. Some of those are the contractor compliance. And so that goes with engaging the existing coastal contractors to actively seek Louisiana residents beyond the initial project hiring stage. And so again, it goes to us being available at LWC to help continue to do the awareness, continue to do recruiting if that is what's needed. So it's not we put one ad out, we made one call to action and no one showed up, and then you hire from outside of the state. We will continue to work with your organization or your business to aid you in staying in compliance, not just the spirit of compliance, but true compliance. And so that may look like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or more hiring events, but we're willing to do that and provide that service. And it doesn't cost anything to take advantage of these services from LWC. The other challenge is the limited workforce. And so disasters have caused relocation and a population shift within the coastal zones. And then we understand that there's also a lessening of the skilled workforce in that labor in that area, in those areas. And so those are some things through partnership, through understanding what your organization provides, what you're needing. There may be an opportunity to partner with the local workforce development board who has training dollars for education. We have the Coursera partnership, which is paid for through LWC. So there would not be a cost for you if you had an employee current or potentially new that you would like to gain a skill, be upskilled in. There's no cost for that. And so that's a part of what the partnership in LWC can offer to you as well. So we do have opportunities for industry engagement. CPRA and LWC do meet quarterly to go look at the goals, to look at what we need to do to make sure that we are contacting or reaching those contractors, assisting with compliance and anything that we could possibly provide as a service. And then we also do have coastal industry sector convenings, and so that's for the stakeholders and the contractors. They are quarterly meetings, and we can provide a schedule if you reach out to us, and Jock will have my information as well. And then in there, this is about what are you seeing, what are you missing, what are you needing, how can we assist you? Is there a plan that we could create or work with you to help you achieve whatever your goal is? And my name is Lisa Williams again. I am an administrator within the Office of Workforce Development, and my contact information is here. I've left some business cards, and we were over at the event earlier today. So there were packets passed out. If you missed that, you're welcome to call our office. We'll meet with you one-on-one, or if you want a group meeting, we're willing to set that up for you as well. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Lisa. And that's right, everyone, as Lisa had mentioned, this, the slides that are being presented today, they're being collected for external distribution. And you may have heard earlier, we are recording this session as well as all the technical webinar series that we had done last week, in addition to the project-led forecast that's going to occur tomorrow. With that, we're showing the agenda here. I want to pause briefly and just look and acknowledge the amount of projects we have. As Rudy said, it's going to be predominantly CPRA staff that are going to be presenting them, but also with some help from our private sector engineering, design engineers that we work with as well. We've got 11 good projects to come, and I'll look out for any questions. As I said before, this is a reminder, we'll do in-person first and then virtual as well. And I guess with that, we're going to get Mr. Alex Holton from CPRA's engineering division up here to talk about the Breton Land Bridge Marshallization West project.
So my name is Alex Holston, and I'll be presenting first on the Breton Land Bridge West Marsh Creation Project, or BS 38. So just a project overview. It's part of the QIPR program proposed in PPL 28. Our federal sponsor is NOAA, and it's in Plaquemines Parish. So last industry day, this is what the project looked like. But since then, due to kind of a heads up from a nearby project, BS 32, we realized we needed to do some additional surveys of our project due to the changing landscape. So we did that in the fall, and updated the shape of our project. So this is the current layout of the project. So currently we have 5 marsh creation areas, a total of 609 acres. That'll take about 2.5 million cubic yards of fill. About 10,000 feet of our lake dike feature, which is shown in the red on MCAs 1, 2, 4, and 5. And it'll use a nearby borrow source from Grand Lake. So this slide shows the our access route and some of the infrastructure that exists. So from the northeast corner near Delacroix, we'll utilize Bayou Gentili coming down to Little Lake and then to Grand Lake to ourselves. So I have highlighted 2 areas where we do have crossings of gas pipelines. So in the northeast part near the start of Bayou Gentili, that's shown in the orange, there's 3 lines that will cross over. And then at the end of Bayou Gentili, highlighted in the green, there's a single pipeline, Gulf South pipeline, that will cross before going into Little Lake. But all of these are the mud lines are -8 elevation or -12 in the southern part. So it's very deep, and probing wasn't able to hit any pipelines. So the pipelines are very deep, and BS 32 nearby project is utilizing this route as well, and they've safely done that. And this slide also shows some areas where we've designed for access dredging, shown in the red. So any areas that are shallower than -6, we put in access dredging to allow for larger equipment to get to the project and help construct our lake dike features. So the template is down to a -6 elevation, 60-foot width, total length of about 27,000 linear feet, and total effort of about 124,000 cubic yards. So onto the project features. Our earth and containment dikes will be built up to a +4 elevation with a 1/4 foot plus or minus tolerance, 5-foot crown width, 4-to-1 side slopes. Total containment dike length is about 40,000 linear feet. They'll utilize interior borrow that'll be backfilled. And for the marsh creation areas, constructed marsh fill elevations, MCA 1 will be built to a +2.25 plus or minus 1/4 foot tolerance. And then the other MCAs 2 through 5 will be built to a +2.75 elevation. And for our lake dike features, so this is for MCAs 1, 2, and 4, it'll be a large dike built up to +3 elevation with an additional foot above that for tolerance. The crown width will be 40 feet. On our Grand Lake side, the side slope will be 5-to-1, and then on the marsh side, it'll be 4-to-1. And for those 3 cells, their lake dike, it's a total of about 7,000 linear feet. And then the MCA 5 cell has a bit smaller of a lake dike feature. It'll be built up to the containment elevation of +4, have a ground width of 15 feet, and there's about 2,600 linear feet of that feature. And then for the borrow source, it's pulling from a nearby Grand Lake location. The average depth in the lake is about -5 foot elevation, and the cut depth will be down to -20, so 15 feet. The material in the borrow is primarily lean and fat clay layers mixed with a silt layer. And the 194-acre area contains about 4.5 million cubic yards available. Yeah, so just a summary of the estimated quantities. About 2.5 million cubic yards of hydraulic dredging and marsh creation, about 40,000 linear feet of containment dikes, about 10,000 total linear feet of lake dike, and about 27,000 linear feet of access dredging. And so the schedule for this project, we received phase 2 approval in January of 2022, received our construction permit of January 2023. The anticipated bid advertisement is this fall, and the estimated construction duration is 570 days. And I think we can take any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, everybody, we do have some time to take a couple of questions here. I've been looking through the chat. I did not see any there, but if anyone has any, representative, feel free to come up and ask. The next project on our agenda, Alex is also presenting, is the BF 37 East Delacroix Marsh Creation and Terracing project.
So this project is also part of the CPRA PPL 28, also a NOAA sponsored project. And it's just across the parish line, St. Bernard Parish. So this will be 412 acres of marsh creation utilizing a Lake Leary borrow for about 2.6 million cubic yards. And there's also about 19,000 linear feet of earth and terracing. So just looking at the access route and infrastructure, we've got in the northwest corner our Lake Leary borrow area. And the blue location highlighted here is just showing a pump station that'll need to be unimpacted by construction activities. And you can see our marsh creation areas will maintain a channel for that pump to work and get water out into the marsh. And so this slide shows two locations where we have pipeline crossings. So the first one is showing just outside of our bar area. There's 3 pipelines together that will float the dredge pipe over in Lake Leary. And then near Delacroix, there's a single pipeline, a Gulf South pipeline, where we'll also float the dredge pipe over. And just, I guess, ahead of that, there will also be a navigational crossing where Bayou Terrebuff connects to this waterway. And so this slide shows all the locations of our navigation crossing. So we saw the first one here kind of in the middle. But at the start of our entrance into Bayou Terrebuff, we'll have another crossing here, one where Terrebuff meets Bayou Gentilly. And then as our access route kind of ends in Terrebuff at the end of the Delacroix community, comes up through the marsh. We'll have a crossing, and there's this slip past the end of the world that we're working on the design of for dredge pipeline corridor and potential staging area. And then we've got some measures in for protecting marsh and timber mats on the other side for any equipment crossing. But the details of that slip usage and cleanup are still being hammered out with the parish. But nearby, just further east, there's another route where we could cross and enter to get to the cells. So for the project features, this is the bar area from Lake Leary. It's about 6 miles pump distance. The existing elevation is about -5, and we'll have a cut elevation down to -20. The material in the bar is a majority fat clay. And there is one avoidance area on the south edge of our cell that's a sunken boat. So we've got a 100-foot offset for that. And there's approximately 3.4 million cubic yards available. About 2.7 of that is within the primary borrow. Let's see, so the non-shaded portion, and then there is a secondary borrow area, which will require full exhaustion of this primary borrow before it can be utilized, or any other appropriate reasons as identified by the engineer. And so for the marsh creation, again, total of 412 acres. They'll both be filled to a plus 3.25 with plus or minus 1/4 foot of tolerance. MCA 1, which is the northern cell, is 240 acres, and it'll use a cut volume of about 1.6 million cubic yards. And then the southern cell, MCA 2, is 172 acres, and it'll have a cut volume of about 1 million cubic yards. And so for the earthen containment dikes, they'll be built up to a +5 elevation, 5-foot crown width, 4-to-1 side slopes. There's about 16,000 linear feet. They will utilize interior borrow outside of the 4 highlighted areas. So we do have 2 abandoned pipelines that cut through the cells. So in these areas, we've got no excavation zones. And on this west side of MCA 2, there's enough depth of cover. So the design will be to have that location as a equipment crossing spot for going over the pipelines. And on the backside of the Delacroix community, there is an existing levee that will only require a couple spots to be touched up to to get it to our design elevation. And then at the end of construction, up to 20% of our total ECD length will be degraded to the Marshville elevation. And so looking kind of northeast off of that northern MCA 1, we've got a sediment retention terrace. So that's the red line coming to the northeast. It will be built to a plus 4.25 with minus quarter of a foot tolerance. It'll have a 10-foot crown width, 5 side slopes, and it's about 4,000 linear feet of that feature. And then east of the 2 MCAs, we have a terrace field, so 30 total terraces built to the same specifications as the previous retention terrace, so plus 4.25 elevation, 10-foot crown width, 5 side slopes. Each of the terraces will be 500 feet long, so a total of 15,000 linear feet, and they'll be spaced center line to center line, 250 feet apart. So here's a summary of the estimated quantities. So key items, we'll have about 16,000 linear feet of ECDs, a total of about 19,000 linear feet of terracing, and then 1.2 million cubic yards for MCA fill. And so the schedule for this project, phase 2 funding was approved early last year. Their construction permit was received in Q3 of 2023. The anticipated bid advertisement will be Q3 or Q4 of this year. And the estimated construction duration is 550 days. So do we have any questions?
Monitoring the chat, I don't see any pertaining to any projects. One gentleman did say he was not able to see the slides advancing. I attempted to address that directly via chat, but if anyone else in attendance virtually is having a similar issue, we will be making this available afterwards. Looking here, if anyone has any, please do advance and ask away, and I'll ask Kevin Rizzo of Delta Coast Consultants to present on behalf of the AT-22 East Grand Lake Upper Hydrologic Restoration Project. Looks like Chuck has one in attendance. I'll repeat it for you.
For the access corridors and the crossing of Augustine Bluff, Terrebonne, are we required to dig that, or do we lay a pattern bottom or other elevation restrictions for those crossings?
I'm just going to repeat real quick. The gentleman's question was pertaining to access dredging along, I believe, it's Bayou Terrebonne on that project. If it is required to excavate, or if you're allowed to lay a pipe on the bottom. Yeah. And Alex, you can take that if you like.
Yeah, I'll just go back. For the 3, I guess, northern ones, we've got, it'll be down to 8 feet of draft. And then the one near the end of the world, the design is for 4 feet of cover across.
So we have to do to get our line with it.
For the northern ones? In some locations. Sure.
Couple slides, the non-excavation area for the dikes, the red boxes.
Sure.
How big are those red boxes for the non-excavation? Like, do those go through the containment?
For those in attendance, the question has to do with some no excavation areas near the containment dikes, asking the scale of them, and if if they go through the.
We haven't built the levee through the.
Okay. Just clarity on how to construct containment levee in areas that don't have an excavation allowed within. I think relatively speaking, it's going to be probably a pretty small footprint of no work area, no excavation area. But yeah, I'll see what for that.
Yeah, I think the distance is 75 feet. And it will have containment built across it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin. With that, we're gonna get Mr. Kevin Rizzo back up.
All right, good afternoon. Kevin Rizzo with Delta Coast Consultants. We're going to be presenting on the East Grand Lake Hydrologic Restoration AT 22. Just some general project information and overview. This is located inside the Atchafalaya Basin, east of the Atchafalaya River. Again, the purpose of this project is hydrologic restoration inside the basin. We are in Iberville Parish. Not far from the East Atchafalaya Basin Protection Levee Canal. All right, just an overview of the project. Again, the intent here is to do some spall bank gapping and some shallow excavation of some existing old bayous, channels, little creeks to try to improve flow from the north to the south in the basin. We're excavating about a total of 16,600 yards. That number here on the slide was updated with a recent design submittal we did last week. So again, that number is about 16,600 yards that we're going to be excavating from a total of 12 different sites. There are 3 sites off of the Protection Levee Canal to the east. We have a total of 7 sites off of Florida Gas Pipeline, and we have 2 sites off of Bayou Sorrel. So Bayou Sorrel and the Protection Levee Canal both are fairly deep water access routes. To access off of this pipeline canal, you do have water access down in Saltmont Bayou up into the pipeline canal, but after that point, that's going to be, depending on the water levels, it's not going to likely be any kind of floating access down that canal. So some of the project features. Again, we got 3 basic typical sections that just have to do with where we're excavating and where we're going to be placing the material. So this typical section here applies to 3 of the 12 sites that I mentioned. Again, the idea here is to excavate a channel at some existing old bayous about 25 foot wide, and we're placing the material adjacent to the excavation here. The width of our placement varies, of course, depending on how much material we're going to be digging. And the placement depth is going to be limited here to about 8 inches, and that's to not change any habitat or encounter any mitigation requirements based off of this work here. This is another typical section. This typical section here applies to work that's going to be taking place along the Florida Gas Pipeline. It's 7 of the sites. Again, we're going to be cutting gaps in some spall banks on the pipeline canal. Most of them are 100 foot wide. One of them at the end on the west end is 50 foot wide. And the material that we cut out of those spall banks, we're going to be placing adjacent to it back inside the pipeline canal. This is the last typical section of excavation here and placement. This applies to 2 sites off of the Protection Levee Canal. Sites 2 and 3, again, we're going to cut about a 25 foot wide gap in some existing spall banks. Place that material adjacent to those cuts on the actual spall bank themselves. This just an idea of the location of some of the features that I mentioned. This is sites 1, 2, and 3. This is off of the Protection Levee Canal on the east side of the project area. Again, site 1 to the north. This is one of those shallow bayous that we're going to be re-excavating and cleaning out, and we're placing material adjacent to that cut. Sites 2 and 3 on the southern end here, right off of the channel. Those are going to be gaps cut in the spall bank with the material placed back on the spall bank. Again, the length of these sites vary. The longest one is about 410 feet. That's site number 1. Site 2 is about 110 feet, and then site 3 is 250 feet long. This is, again, just a little more information on the sites off of the pipeline canal. This is sites 4 through 10. Again, most of these we're going to cut 100-foot gap in each of the spall banks to allow some water exchange from north to south. Site 10 all the way to the west, that's going to be a 50-foot cut in the spall bank. Again, this material that we take out is going to be placed inside the spall bank. I'm sorry, inside of the pipeline canal. Our last two sites, this is 11 and 12 off of Bayou Sorrel. Again, these are some old silted in bayous that we're going to be cleaning out. Site 11 is 1,900 feet long. Site 12 is 2,170 feet long. We're going to cut a 20-foot channel through there and place the material that we cut adjacent to that excavation on either side. Again, some of the quantities, just the highlights, so there will be some clearing and grubbing. We have some tree removal, some select tree removal. We're removing everything except for some mature cypress trees that may be in the cut and disposal area. Anything greater than 4 inches and 20-foot tall is going to remain. Again, excavation and placement, we're looking at about 16,600 cubic yards of cut. The project schedule, regulatory permits were received in December. Final plans were submitted in March. We anticipate submitting full construction documents on this sometime in May. Advertisement will follow a few months later in around July timeframe, with issuing a notice to proceed later in the year in November approximately. And we estimate about 180 days of construction for this project. All right, any questions?
Kevin. While we wait, I do want to introduce that Kevin is the presenter for the next project. Is the PE 43 GIWW Bank Restoration of Critical Project Areas, which is a maintenance job being procured out of our Pivotal Regional Office. I'm seeing none in the chat so far, Kevin. And anyone wants to advance from the room, feel free. Here now, we'll go ahead and get into it.
All right, so we'll move on to the next project. This is the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway GIWW Bank Restoration of Critical Areas Maintenance Project, TE 43. Some general overview and location information on the project. It is located on the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway, GIWW. In Terrebonne Parish, it's about 10 miles west of Houma, about 10 miles east of the Chaffalaya River, Lower Chaffalaya, in Terrebonne Parish. The goal of this project is shoreline protection. This is just a closer view of where our project features are located. It's just near the Lake Hackberry feature off the GIWW. We have 4 different sites where we're going to do some shoreline protection at some areas that have experienced a lot of erosion and channelization. Most of the marsh in this area is what they call floating marsh, so continued wave action from passing boats and just causes it to eat away. So there's 4 different sites there. We proposing to do some shoreline protection here, total of about 2,500 feet of shoreline protection feature. This is a typical section of what we're planning to use. So this is, I'll call it timber fencing. It's some 50-foot long timber piles driven on about 12-foot centers with some horizontal timber boards, 4 rows. The soil conditions out here are really bad. Previous attempts at shoreline protection using riprap and lightweight aggregate cores were successful for a period of time, but they just experienced a lot of settlement. So this is a feature we're going to use on this project. This particular type of feature was used on a demonstration project a number of years ago, a little further to the east, closer toward Mandalay. It seemed to function pretty well in breaking waves and retaining sediment behind it. Again, another view of the shoreline protection. I mentioned the existing rock dike that's present. So our idea is to install that timber fencing just on the land side of the rock dike, with about a 10-foot offset. Should be adequate water depth to get a material barge with a crane on it up to the dike and still be able to make that reach and drive those piles. There will be, you can access on the backside of the dike just with some smaller equipment, smaller type boats. Just won't be able to remove any of the aggregate riprap to get back there. Again, this is site one, just over 1,600 feet of shoreline protection. Pretty much following the alignment of the existing dike. You've got about a -5-foot contour on the outside, about a -2.5 on the inside. The second site, the rest of the sites are a little shorter than the first one. This one's about 300 foot long. Again, not too far from the first one. These are all relatively close to each other. Again, -5 on the outside, about a -3 on the inside here. And this is the last two sites, 3 and 4, just a little further east. One's about 300 foot, the other's about 250. Again, -4.5 to 5 on the outside with a -3 on the inside. Summary quantities, total at all 4 sites, we're looking at about 216 pilings and just under 30,000 board feet of timber fencing that we plan to use on this project. The schedule, we submitted permits on this back in January. We have completed construction documents this month in March. We anticipate receiving permits in a few months, sometime during the summer. Soon after that, August timeframe, we will advertise for construction bids, with a construction timeframe starting sometime toward the end of the year. And again, we estimate about 60 calendar days required to complete this project. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I'm looking at the chat box. I don't see anything yet here. Give them a couple of minutes or so. If anyone has any in the room, please do ask away. I guess hearing none, to try and get through the rest of the agenda, we're gonna have Mr. Steve Dartez, coastal engineering consultants, come up and discuss the TE 176 West Headland Repair Project.
Afternoon, everybody. For some of y'all, this may be deja vu. So I'm here to talk to you about the West Bell Headland Repair Project, TE 176, which is basically to reconstruct what we lost in Hurricane Zeta during construction of the TE 143 project. It's in Lafourche Parish, just west of the Bell Pass jetties or Port Fourchon. For bar areas, we're going back to the OCS. We're expanding 2 previously excavated bar areas that had cultural clearance. And for pump outs and conveyance corridors, we'll be reusing the 2 pump outs for West Bell that were used during the 143 project over by the pass. This project's being funded by FEMA. So the template is basically the exact same template we had in 143, just a little shorter because they're only paying for us to replace what was lost at the time of the hurricane. So in blue and red, that's your beach and dune, and then in green is your marsh. One of the differences between this particular template and the previous one is this one will all be out of sand from the OCS. So containment is not required for this one. We estimate that we have a 2.6 million cubic yard volume requirement that will be updated shortly. We'll be doing resurveys in the next month or so and getting those updated. Equipment access will be from Bell Pass or from the Gulf shoreline. Our previous access channel now is in much shallower water, and it was deemed to be not very effective to go back and redig that. In magenta, there are conveyance corridors coming in from offshore. And I'll get to those a little bit in a minute. So again, typical section, beach dune there on the left side of your cross section. Target elevations are +5 for the beach, +7.5 for the dune. We got a little 100-foot wide back beach behind the dune. And then we drop off into the marsh at a +3. All the slopes are 1/25. And for the purposes at the moment for calculating volumes, we're using a construction tolerance of +1 foot. So what you're seeing on the right side, outside of the hatched area, that is the TE 143 Ship Shoal Bar area. We've renamed the expansion of that to the west to 176A. We carried through all of the design cut elevations that were adjacent in the previous bar area, as well as the overdredge, or not overdredge, but the limited disturbances to ease in our permitting process. So I'm showing two different volumes, and there's a reason for that. Is one is with hopper dredge, we get much closer to the design cut without disturbing below it. So I have about 2 million cubic yards available in all of the hatched area. However, with only a 3 foot limited disturbance, we're gonna have to bring the cutter head up in order to get a very efficient cut and pumping from a cutter head. So that's 1.37 million cubic yards. Distance to the West Bell pump out area is about 23 nautical miles. Just a typical section here, straight wall sides. You're not, no issues with side slopes. Those won't be on you as a contractor. We're gonna let them fall to what Mother Nature lets them fall. Cuts range from -38 down to 41. So 176B, this is a westward expansion of the Whiskey Island Caillou Lake TE 100 project that also had cultural clearance and geotech information in it. So in this one, again, the same design dredge cuts were carried forward westward from the previous bar area and verified with the geotech data. And again, with only a 3 foot limited disturbance, we've got a hopper dredge availability of 8 million with a cutter head of about 6. This one is a little further to the west, so it's about 35 nautical miles to the project. And again, just a little cross section there showing our -27 down to -32.5 on the cuts. Conveyance quarters, I mentioned we used these previously in 143. The cyan hatched area is the old West Bell Marsh Bar area. That will be reused as a pump out area again. The magenta lines are a conveyance corridor coming from this pump out area. They're 300 feet wide with a 250 foot per side allowable anchorage area. There are 2 avoidance areas near this corridor that we'll have to be cognizant of when utilizing it. It also includes the spur that we would put in through a permit mod during the 143 project. The pump out area has got an average depth of about -33 based on our 2021 post-construction surveys, which were post-IDA. And then the corridor runs from about -28 up to the shoreline for that. The West Bell feeder beach pump out area, sorry for the West Bell being repeated so much, but that's what it is, was put in as a permit mod during the construction of 143 after the hurricanes. And it's just south of the Bell Pass jetties. The corridor runs actually between the navigation channel and the jetties. And then we come ashore in where we constructed the West Bell feeder beach. So the average depth in that pump out area is about -33 to 35 based on those post-construction surveys, and runs from about a -30 at the pump out area up to -10 where it joins in right here with West Bell feeder beach. So the access I mentioned was from across the feeder beach. So equipment can come across the rocks, run along the shoreline, and you can just see the template sticking in right here on this image for access. Or if the weather conditions allow, you're welcome to bring any equipment you want into the work area from the Gulf side. Quick list of our quantities, again, about 2.6 million on the cubic yards for the fill material. We will be installing sand fencing again, as well as settlement plates and overwash monitoring systems. We've broken the surveys into 2 line items this time. There's a pre and a post, as well as a construction survey. There is rationale for that by our requirements for the BOEM negotiated agreement. And then bird abatement to be on a per day basis. We're estimating about 200 days for that while it's under construction. And of course, if hopper dredges are chosen to be used, we'll have the sea turtle observations and relocations that'll be required for that. Again, our headland surveys, we hope to have those done in the next month or so, and we'll be updating the volumes. And we anticipate advertisement in the fall of 2024.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, some critical work there. First line of defense we'll talk about. Your, like your deja vu reference.
Yeah,
Um,
I knew it was
everyone has
coming.
any here in attendance, feel free to ask away. I'm looking at the chat box as well. I see, one certain Chuck Broussard.
Yes, sir.
hand up.
Have you, tried to request a variance in your existing permit to allow for the service?
Just to repeat, gentleman's question had to do with pursuing a variance from a permit perspective to allow for additional disturbance. It looked to be about 3 to 4 feet based on our.
They were 3 feet, and as in prior, it's really has more to do with our negotiated agreement than the permit. And we can investigate that in due time with those agencies. We don't have,
Trying to get you to be a little more, you can speak to the mic.
we don't have our NNA just yet. So obviously you want to get that in hand first, and then we can evaluate that. But similar to previous experiences. But that's why I split the volumes up for you. Yes, ma'am. I
Just to
think
repeat real quick, the lady's question was, the construction duration.
it's gonna be in the order of just over about 400 days. It's really gonna depend on the method used. So, in my estimate for construction, I was very liberal. Because depending on what is used for construction, will definitely change that. So it's fairly wide window.
Appreciate it, everybody. I think we're gonna go ahead and move on here. Next one I've got is Mr. Dylan Olson from CPRA Engineering, who's gonna present on the TE 170 project by Dularge Ridge and Marsh Creation.
Good afternoon. Like you said, Dylan Olson, I'll be presenting the Bayou Dularge Ridge and Marsh Creation, TE 170. The project is located in Terrebonne Parish, about 10 miles southwest of Terrio, Louisiana. Be a lake merchant borrow source, and this is a Deepwater Horizon Restoration Plan #8 project with the federal sponsor of NOAA. The project includes 3 marsh creation areas and 2,200 linear feet of earthen ridge. The MCAs will be broken down to MCA 1, 2, and 3, as seen on the east and west side of Grand Pass here. There will also be 2,700 linear feet of earthen containment dikes. And as seen in the purple, we will also have 23 acres of marsh nourishment. Here's the typical section for the ridge. It will be a multiple lift construction using sources from within the MCAs where applicable and within Bayou Dularge where there is no MCA adjacent. The ridges will be built to elevation of +5 with 15-foot crown width and side slopes of 5 to 1. There are some camps along the ridge, the existing ridge, and we'll have to build behind those to accommodate those. Here's the typical section for the ECD in Marshville. There will be 2,700 linear feet of ECDs built to 4.5 feet with 5-foot crowns and 4 to 1 side slopes. The max slurry elevation will be 3 to 2.5, depending on which MCA. And the existing ground in the area is approximately -2 in the water area and 0.6 where there's marsh. The equipment access corridor starts north of the bar area in Lake Merchant and is total 17 miles. Shown here is the ECD where access dredging will be required and permitted. We do have the permit for this project already, construction permit. We will be crossing a oyster seed ground in Lake Merchant, as shown in the hashed area on this map. The spoil banks will be limited to one side when we're crossing that area. Also crossing the Tennessee gas pipeline on the south side of Rackersea Bay. The pipeline is under the mud line and should not interfere with the access border. There are two unverified 6-inch pipelines that we are currently doing data collection to possibly identify. The bar area is located in Lake Merchant. Current average water bottom of -6 feet width, and maximum dredge cut is to -20. The pump distance 4.2 miles to the farthest area. We anticipate 5.5 million cubic yards available and requiring approximately 2 million cubic yards. Like I said, dredge pipe corridor is 2.5 to 4, depending on which MCA it is. There's a submerged navigational crossing at Grand Pass and Bayou Du Large at multiple locations. As shown on this typical section to the left, that is the Grand Pass navigational crossing where it has depths greater than 30 feet. Here are the project quantities. We mentioned most of these. Items 12 and 13, we will have vegetative planting along the ridge. That's what that's shown here. Currently, we are doing some additional data collection and hoping to finish that up maybe this summer, where we'll move into final design and hopefully have land rights done by the end of this year, where we can then advertise for construction. Anticipate construction duration of 500 days. Questions?
Thank you, Bill. I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any yet. So we got one from Chuck Broussard.
What's the depth of the access? Down the slide is too small.
Yeah, -6
Just
depth,
the question was, the depth of the access channel.
-6 depth with 60-foot wide.
Only permanent.
Yes. I think that Tennessee gas pipeline is -13.
Seeing Jack. We can go ahead and move on. Next presenter is Adam Linson, CPRA's Engineering Division. He's going to be presenting the PO 181 by Maine Marsh Creation Project.
All right, as Jacques said, my name is Adam Linson, and I'll be presenting the Bayou Cane Marsh Creation Project PO 181. So this project was presented at Industry Day last year, and there hasn't been really any significant changes to the layout of the project since then. So if you were here last year, this project may look, or the features at least will look pretty familiar to you. The project itself is located in the Pontchartrain Basin on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, as you can see in the figure on the right. It is adjacent to two recently constructed projects, the PO 33 Goose Point project and the PO 104 Bayou Bonfuca projects, both to the southeast. Like those two projects, it also proposes to construct marsh using a Lake Pontchartrain borrow source, and it was approved under CPRA for phase 2 funding in December of 2022, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service serving as the federal sponsor. So this slide shows a layout of the entire project area. I'll kind of briefly go through each of these features on this slide and then get into details of them through the rest of the presentation. There's a total of 7 marsh creation areas spanning approximately 633 acres and requiring about 2.5 million cubic yards of fill material. All 7 of the marsh creation areas will be fully contained, and that amounts to about 62,000 linear feet of earthen containment dike, some of which will be constructed using external borrow sources. And again, the material will come from that borrow source in Lake Pontchartrain that you can see just offshore, about a mile and a half from the shoreline of Lake Pontchartrain. The total bar area has about 15.5 million cubic yards, so quite a sizable bar area for this project. One thing to note that I'll get into when we discuss the bar area in a little bit more detail is the shallow Pleistocene surface that was discovered during the geotechnical investigations for this project. And then lastly, for the equipment access corridor, you can see from the bar area to the shoreline of Lake Pontchartrain, there are 3 shoreline crossings, as well as 3 dredge pipeline corridor crossings, one near MCA 1, which is all the way on the top left corner of the screen here, one near MCA 3, and then the third near MCA 4 over on the east side of the project. So starting first talking about the containment dike in the marsh fill, it's probably a little bit difficult to see on the screen here, but the typical section of the containment and the marsh creation areas are shown in the bottom left here. Again, there's about 62,000 linear feet of earthen containment dike spread across the 7 marsh creation areas. And a pretty sizable earthen containment dike for this project, about 6.5 foot max for all of the areas except for MCA 7. And one of the big reasons for that is due to the material we're expected to encounter in the bar area. Is very shallow Pleistocene that could potentially result in slurry elevations as high as plus 5.5 feet in order for us to get that material into those areas. So that's why you're seeing such sizable sections here. For MCA 7, the soil conditions are a little worse than what we're seeing on the in the rest of the project area. So those are a foot lower and with 4-on-1 side slopes versus the 3-on-1 that you'll see for the rest of the marsh creation areas. For all the earthen containment dikes, there's a 5-foot crown width. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, each portion of marsh creation areas will have reaches of external borrow, serving as the primary borrow source for these, or for that specific portion of earthen containment, with some secondary internal borrow areas permitted as well. For the marsh fill elevation, again, that maximum elevation for all areas except for MCA 7 is plus 5.5 feet, or MCA 7 is a foot lower at plus 4.5 feet. So a little bit different for this project. It'll be based on volume for acceptance rather than elevation, due to the fact that the materials we're expecting to encounter in the bar area could potentially result in slurry elevations ranging anywhere from a foot to 1.5 foot difference. So that's really the ultimate driving force behind the elevations you're seeing here on the screen right now. The average monoline elevations for a majority of the project range from about -1 to -1.5, with 2 areas on the east side of the project, MCA 4 and MCA 6, close to -1.5 to -2 feet. On the bottom right of the screen, you'll see, well, you might be able to see this if you're joining on the Zoom call, but for those in the room, there is an optional second lift for the earthen containment dike to reach that maximum elevation of plus 6.5 feet. However, the minimum elevations that are being shown there is a plus 5.5 foot earthen containment dike with a 1/2 foot lower tolerance. So focusing in on the bar area now in Lake Pontchartrain, as I mentioned earlier, it's about 1 mile to 1.5 miles from the shoreline. The average water bottom elevation in this area is about -11 feet. We're currently permitting a 15-foot cut, so a bottom elevation of about -26 throughout the bar area. The material that we've encountered from the geotech borings was predominantly stiff to firm lean clays and fat clays, with some pockets of sand in there in the upper 10 feet. However, below that is pretty much strictly Pleistocene material, with some potential for clay balling, as we've seen on the past Goose Point projects, as well as the Bayou Von Fuca projects. So this slide kind of goes into a little bit more of the detail of the expected clay balling behavior based off of what we've seen on the past Pontchartrain projects. Basically, what you're seeing here on the right side of the screen is a plot of the liquidity index of the materials as a result of the geotech analysis. On the left side, the red line is the Von Fuca project, and all the way on the right side over here in yellow is the Goose Point project. The Bayou Cane points seem to fall in between those 2 projects based on what we've seen from the lab data. So we are expecting, based on what we saw observed during construction of those 2 projects, that likely there will be some clay ball potential for this project as well. And then lastly, this is showing just an overview of the dredge pipe and equipment access corridors. The equipment access coming from that bar area to the shoreline of Lake Pontchartrain, where there are 3 total crossings permitted for access and dredge pipeline placement into the marsh creation areas. The predominant reason for that is because Bayou Cane is a scenic waterway. We don't want to allow access or dredge pipe placement in those areas. And additionally, the Big Branch National Wildlife Refuge, which owns the lands on the east side of the project, MCA 4 through MCA 7, they've requested us to not use those existing tidal creeks as equipment access either. Within 500 feet of the shoreline, there is existing grass beds present. And so we are asking the contractor, per permit requirements, to please float all the dredge pipeline as well as any equipment from that distance to the shoreline of Lake Pontchartrain. Once you reach the shoreline of Lake Pontchartrain, there are three crossings that are denoted here on the screen. One at MCA 1, one at 3, and one at 4. That'll be accessed directly over the shoreline using board mats to help mitigate impacts to the existing shore. The pump distance ranges anywhere from about 1.5 miles to 4 miles, with an average right around 2.5 miles. So just a brief overview of the project schedule. Again, we received construction funding for this project in December of 2022 and turned around a permit application a month later. Some consultations are still being discussed for this project, so we're not expecting construction permit until later on this year, around October or November timeframe. But we do hope to immediately turn around and be able to advertise the project not long after receiving the permit, and hopefully we'll issue an NTP sometime at the very beginning of 2025. And then this is just showing the summary of quantities. I won't go through each of them in detail, but just again, there's about 62,000 linear feet of earthing containment for all 7 marsh creation areas. And here you can see broken out the cut volume requirements for each of the 7 marsh creation areas. It's a total of about 2.5 million cubic yards. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Good job, Adam. See none in the chat box. Anybody has any in the room, you can take them now. Yes, hearing none, Adam is the next presenter as well on the CS 87A project, Calcasieu Sabine, large scale marsh and hydrologic restoration.
Thanks, Jacques. Yep, as Jacques said, this is the Calcasieu Sabine large scale marsh and hydrologic restoration. Today I'm going to focus in on CS 87A, which consists of the lake rim drainage structures. So this project is located in Cameron Parish, within the Cameron Creole watershed along the eastern shoreline of Calcasieu Lake, as you can see in the figure here. There's 7 proposed gravity drainage structures with backflow prevention proposed along that eastern bank. It's adjacent to the previously constructed CS 54 project and the no-name bayou project CS 78, which has recently begun construction. So for these 7 drainage structures, ultimately the final location and capacities of these structures was determined through some preliminary modeling efforts performed by Mott McDonald with some additional HEC-RAS modeling performed to kind of hone in on the final project benefits, as well as the specifics of some of the features you're going to see today pertaining to the 60-inch diameter culverts, such as the invert elevation, the slope, and the length of these features. So each of these structures consists of multiple 60-inch diameter culverts. You can see 3 of them include 17-inch or 17 culverts. 2 of them have 23 culverts, and the remaining 2 have 31 of these culverts. All of these structures will be supported with timber piles and include features like the backflow prevention devices, such as the duckbill check valves or inline check valves, trash and debris screens to prevent clogging of the culverts, the sheet pile head walls, which you can see on the bottom left most typical section here, walkways with handrails on both sides of the project feature, riprap line channels on both the marsh side and on the lake side, as well as articulated concrete mats on both sides to help reduce scour. In addition to those structures, there's a fair amount of excavation required in order to actually construct each of these gravity drainage structures. That material will be used on site to help with the levee backfill and reinforcing the batcher in those areas, as you can kind of see on the screen here. In addition, each of the 7 drainage structures has temporary flotation channels on the Calcasieu Lake side with 50-foot bottom widths and 1.5 on one side slopes, with temporary side cast material that will be backfilled upon completion of construction activities. And this is just an overview of equipment access to the project. As you can see, the equipment access routes come in through Calcasieu Lake up to each of those 7 structures on the eastern shoreline of Calcasieu Lake. Within each of those boxes, not really sure how well you can see them here on the screen, but that's where the flotation channels will be allowed. It's important to note that Calcasieu Lake is a Tier 2 oyster seed ground, so there will not be any disturbance of water bottoms permitted outside of those work areas that I showed on the previous slide. And within the lake itself, there will be no wheel washing or prop washing allowed along those access routes. That route is 60 feet in width as permitted, and it is fairly shallow in Calcasieu Lake, so it's anticipated that shallow draft barges may be required to construct these features. Something that's not shown on here is that those flotation channels for a handful of the structures actually do connect to each other. For example, the Peconi South and Mangrove North structures on the north side of the project here, as well as 4 of the 4 of those structures that are kind of grouped towards the middle of the project area here. Just to briefly go over the schedule, the construction permit was applied for a couple weeks back. We're hoping to be able to receive that permit sometime in the fall of this year and hopefully advertise sometime in the beginning of 2025. And just an overview of the quantities. Again, I won't go through each of these in detail. There's about 300,000 cubic yards roughly of earthwork required for those 7 total drainage structures. Just over 13,000 feet of those 60-inch culverts, each requiring some kind of backflow prevention device. And then you see the timber piles associated with the support for each of those structures, and about 227,000 square feet of steel sheet piling for the head wall feature. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Adam. Definitely an interesting project out in that area with a lot of activity going on, for sure. Thanks for doing the design team. If anyone has any questions in attendance, please do let us know. We can try to field them. See you in the chat.
Right.
Yes, hearing none, and we're getting to the kind of towards the end. Still got a little ways to go here, but we're going to invite Ms. Olivia Lane and CPRA Engineering to come up and talk about the PO 179 St. Catherine Island Marsh Creation and Shoreline Protection Project.
Good afternoon, everyone. My voice is trying to leave me today, so apologize if you have any issues hearing me, let me know. Like Chuck said, I will be presenting on the St. Catherine Island Marsh Creation and Shoreline Protection Project, or PO 179. So this project is not far from the PO 181 project that Adam presented earlier. It is within Orleans Parish, not far from New Orleans. It's actually on the southern shore of Lake Pontchartrain in this little portion of the lake near the causeway. It is part of the Bayou Sauvage National Wildlife Refuge. It is a CPRA-funded project, and it consists of both marsh creation and shoreline protection features. Here's just an overview on the project features. Our bar area is in Lake Pontchartrain. It is 153 acres, which contains approximately 1.7 million cubic yards of material. We have 2 marsh creation areas. They're pretty small on the east side of this waterway, which is Chef Mentor Pass. And they total just around 140 acres and require 630,000 cubic yards of material. The total containment type length for the 2 cells is around 15,000 linear feet. And our shoreline protection feature consists of marine mattresses, which is unique to many of our projects at CPRA that have shoreline protection features. We have 2 types of marine mattresses, ones that will be placed on to the containment dike along the lakeshore. That consists of about 5,400 linear feet, and ones that will be placed on the existing shoreline as a revetment type, and that is about 9,000 linear feet. We have this section on the west side that overlaps a little with a pre-existing rock dike out in the water built by the Corps. And then the rest of the shoreline protection feature extends from the point of the peninsula here on the east side and extending all the way to this bayou here called Big Cedar Bayou, I believe. Oh, and some other things to note for this project that I'll show further later is, we do have cultural avoidance areas within the bar area and along the access for the shoreline protection features. And we have 5 proposed sheet pile gap closures along our containment line. So here's a layout of our bar area. You can see our 3 avoidance areas there, and they require a 50-meter radius buffer zone. The material in our bar area is mixed sediment. There are some sands and silts within it, but it is primarily soft clays in the upper 20 feet. Our cut elevation is minus 15 feet. And as I mentioned before, there is 1.7 million cubic yards available, but we only need 630,000 cubic yards for the marsh creation areas. The max pump distance from the bar area to the furthest points of the marsh creation areas is about 1.5 miles. And at the bottom here on this slide, you can see a section of the bar area. Backing up here to see the entirety of this Bayou Sauvage National Wildlife Refuge relative to our project features. We actually have not identified any pipelines or flow lines that would affect the project, which is positive. And we anticipate equipment access to come from the Intracoastal Waterway here to the south and up Chef Minter Pass to the bar area. We do not anticipate access dredging being needed to get the dredge to the bar area. We have 2 dredge pipeline corridors going to each of the 2 cells. And as I mentioned, the maximum anticipated pump distance is 1.5 miles. We have flotation channels and temporary spoil placement areas that follow the entirety of the shoreline protection features, totaling 14,500 linear feet if access dredging is required to get the barge up to the shore. There are also cultural avoidance areas within these flotation channels, and I will show that a little closer here. This is the western feature on the west side of Chef Minter Pass. It is entirely the revetment type where the mattress is installed onto the existing shoreline, and the cultural areas are here along that point. So light loading of the barge or double handling of material might be needed to avoid affecting these areas. And this is what it looks like on the east side. There are four avoidance areas here, but it looks like just this westernmost one might be relevant for flotation access. Now looking at the typical sections, this example is from Marsh Creation Area 2, MCA 2, but the design of the fill heights and the containment dikes is the same for both Marsh Creation areas. As mentioned before, the total linear footage of containment is around 15,000. Our crown elevation is +4 for the dikes with a plus half a foot tolerance. The crown width is 5 feet and the side slopes are 4-to-1 except for the containment dikes along the lake shore, which have a 5-to-1 slope on the lake side. And those are the dikes that the marine mattresses will be placed on top of. The Marsh Creation fill elevation is +3 with a plus or minus 1/4 foot tolerance. And the current average mudline elevations of the 2 cells are minus 1.7 feet for MCA 1 and minus 1.5 feet for MCA 2. This is a look at the locations of our sheet pile closures. They occur at crossing where the containment dike would be crossing a tidal channel that is deeper than -3. There are 3 located within MCA 1 and 2 within MCA 2. They will be driven to an elevation of -26, and the top elevation will be a +4, which matches the containment dikes. And they will be reinforced with a sand berm built to a +1 with 3-to-1 side slopes. Here are some typical sections of those marine mattresses. The first one is representing the shoreline revetment type. It is an 8-inch thick mattress, 30 feet long with the first 12 feet placed horizontally on the existing shoreline. And the rest will be graded to a 4-to-1 side slope down into the water, with the excess material being placed onto the toe to prevent sliding and scour. All of the mattresses will be placed on top of geotextile fabric as well. The bottom image is of the marine mattresses placed on top of the containment dikes. These are also 8-inch thick, but they are 40 feet long. They will be placed across the top of the dike and follow the 5-to-1 side slope down into the water with excess material placed on the toe. Another component of the marine mattress revetment segments are what we call riprap revetment terminations. These are rock riprap caps that protect the exposed ends of the marine mattresses from wave action. And they consist of a geogrid composite layer at the bottom with a bedding stone layer, and then larger stone riprap on top. Their cross-sectional properties are similar to that of the marine mattress, where there is a length of it placed onto the existing shoreline, and it is graded down to the water at a 3-to-1 side slope. Here's a summary of all of those quantities. The only ones here that I didn't really mention in previous slides are the temporary navigation aids for the shoreline protection areas, and then the grade stakes and settlement plates necessary for the marsh creation areas. A look at our project schedule. We were authorized construction funding by CPRA in this past December. We're currently working on the construction permit and getting servitude agreements. We anticipate this conservative bid advertisement next fall, and the construction duration is estimated to be 522 days. And that's it.
Thanks, Libby. Take any questions now on the P-179 project or any in the room? I'm seeing none in the chat. Hearing none, we can go ahead and invite Earl House up from CPRA's engineering division to present upon the BS-43 project, radio and marsh creation.
Hi, I'm Errol Naus, and I'll be presenting on Reggio Marsh Creation Project, BS-43 in St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana. So this project is located in St. Bernard Parish, and the marsh creation areas are about 5 miles north of Delacroix and about 20 miles southeast of New Orleans. This is a Corpa PPL 30 project with a federal sponsor being EPA. And Reggio was approved for phase 2 construction funding in January of 2024. So it's a marsh creation project with 4 MCAs totaling 519 acres. So there is some current oil and gas infrastructure that will be avoided. So there's the dredge pipeline corridor will have 4 pipeline crossings, one directly adjacent to the Morrow area, the Colonial Pipeline, and then 3 pipelines on the eastern Lake Leary side, being a Targa pipeline and 2 High Point gas pipelines. And there's also 3 navigational crossings, all occurring within Bayou Terrebonne. The average pumping distance is 6.2 miles. And the Morrow area is located in Lake Leary. And there's 3 wellheads that will need to be avoided within the Morrow area. And I'll get to those later. So the marsh creation areas, are all in the same fill area, divided by 3 internal training dikes. So MCA 1, the northernmost marsh creation area, is 123 acres. And they'll all 4 be constructed to a marsh fill elevation of +2 feet with an upper tolerance of 1/2 foot. MCA 2 is also 123 acres. MCA 2 is the deepest cell at -0.59 feet. They're all between 0 and -1 foot, except MCA 1 is +0.33 average bottom elevation. MCAs 3 and 4 are a bit larger. They're 136 and 137 acres, each requiring over 500,000 cubic yards. An example of a typical section of a marsh creation area is here. This is MCA 1 typical section. So for the containment dike quantities, so the 1 earthen containment dike totaling 26,145 linear feet, and it will require approximately 72,900 cubic yards to construct. And it will have a stability berm of 30 feet between the interior Borough area and the toe of the dike. It will have a 5-foot crown width and be constructed to a plus 3.5 feet with 3-to-1 side slopes. The internal training dikes, there'll be 3 total, and they'll be constructed up to plus 3 feet elevation, and will also have a 30-foot stability berm between the borrow area and the toe of the dike with a 5-foot crown width and also 3-to-1 side slopes. Both the earthen containment dikes and the internal training dikes will require gapping and degrading after acceptance of the marsh creation areas, and they both have examples of the typical sections here at the bottom of the slide. The borrow area is in Lake Leary. It's divided into a primary and secondary borrow area. The primary borrow area is 111 acres and will provide up to 2.7 million cubic yards, which is more than enough for our project. The secondary borrow area is 128 acres and will provide up to 3.1 million cubic yards of material, and will require the engineer approval and full exhaustion of the primary borrow area to use. The average bottom elevation of Lake Leary is -5 feet, and the proposed depth of cut for the dredge is 15 feet. So that's a max dredge cut elevation of -20 feet. There's 5 avoidance areas in the proposed borrow area, 3 wellheads, which are shown here with the red dots, and those will require 250 feet avoidance shown with the red circles. And then there's 2 unknown side scan sonar hits shown in the orange dots here with 100-foot avoidance areas. There are also 2 pipelines at the borrow area centered between that will require 250 feet avoidance, which it is lying there now, and the majority of the soil types from our borings is fat clay. An example of the typical section of the borrow area is listed here, down to an elevation of -20 with an area disturbance to -23 feet. This is a summary of the estimated quantities. We'll need a total of 48 grade stakes, 11 settlement plates, and the total earthen containment dike and 3 internal training dikes total up to about 88,206 cubic yards required. And all 4 MCAs will total about 2,008,947 cubic yards. The dredge pipe corridor will have 3 navigation crossings in Bayou Terrebonne. Both navigation crossings 1 and 2 will require some excavation, and the third one will have to cross underneath a bridge to cross Highway 300, which will require some DOTD consultation and a standard DOTD permit. And lastly, protective measures will be required to cross 300 feet of existing marsh to get into the marsh creation areas. This is an example. The bridge is shown here, and this is in a typical section of a navigation crossing. Lastly, the schedule. So phase 2, we're approved for phase 2 funding January of this year, Q1 of 2024. We anticipate applying for construction permit this summer in 2024, so Q3. We anticipate advertising for our bid Q3 of 2025, and the construction duration estimate is 554 days. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Rule. See none in the chat box yet. The folks in the room, a little bit of time to ask any. Hearing none, we do have one final construction project presentation coming up. We're gonna have Mr. Kyle Galloway from GIS Engineering come present on the TE 134 West Lucian Marsh Creation and Nursing Project.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kyle Galloway with GIS Engineering, and I'll start by apologizing for my voice. I was at the LSU baseball game Saturday night and lost it there, but I'm just glad that I wasn't there yesterday. So thank you all for having me. I'm excited to present this project on behalf of CPRA and the Greater Lafourche Port Commission. So the project will include 3 marsh creation areas. You'll note on the map there that the numbering is out of order. MCA 3 was added later on the north side of the project, and that's also a bit additive. We'll get into some more details on that in a minute. But the project is in Lafourche Parish, right across Bayou Lafourche from Port Fourchon. It was funded on PPL 24 in 2020. And the federal sponsor is NOAA, and then the Greater Lafourche Port Commission is a big local stakeholder on the project. The project will include 814 acres of marsh creation and 458 acres of marsh nourishment. The borrow area encompasses Bell Pass, Bayou Lafourche, the flotation canal, and several slips within the port. Just note that the southern end of the borrow area extends a little over a mile past the jetties. And currently, we're finalizing the bid package. We expect to be complete with that in 2 to 3 months, and then putting this out for bid mid to late summer. All right, so as I mentioned, 814 acres of marsh creation and 458 acres of marsh nourishment. You'll see the various elevations and quantities there on the slide. For earthen containment, all of the ECDs have a crown width of 5 feet and a bench distance of 25 feet. The crown elevations and side slopes vary depending on the marsh creation area. They're all interior borrow. They'll be paid by linear foot. And then there will be some gapping of the dikes after the marsh creation areas are accepted. On the borrow area, as I mentioned, Bell Pass, Bayou Lafourche, flotation canal, and the slips, we don't expect to need the entire borrow area. And it is largely a federal channel, which is maintained by the Corps. Our proposed dredging depth is minus 33. And there is one pipeline conflict, the Chevron pipeline, which will have a 200 to 400 foot wide buffer. That's one of the little details that we're still working out. Speaking of pipelines, there are a few pipelines crossing the marsh creation area, 2 active 16-inch lines, 1 active 12-inch line, and 1 abandoned 6-inch line. And then, as I mentioned, in the borrow area, we have that one conflict with a 10-inch Chevron pipeline. There's 3 other pipelines. One has been removed, and the other are deep enough to not be. Other 2 are not deep enough to. Are deep enough to avoid a conflict. All right, and the quantities are on the screen. One thing I want to highlight here. I believe this project was presented last year, and that was kind of the announcement that Bell Pass would be the borrow area. So previously, bird abatement was required because we expected the dredge corridor to cross the West Bell headland, and now that's no longer the case. So we're still confirming that it's not going to be required, but we anticipate that that will be removed from the project. And that's fortunate considering what we just heard about T-176, because that would have gotten pretty cramped there. So schedule, as I mentioned, we are finalizing the bid package now and anticipate advertising 3rd quarter of this year. And we're expecting a contract duration of 450 days. And unless there are any questions, that'll close it out for this portion.
Yeah, we'll get close to a couple minutes to see one in the room here.
So will there be any priority of what channels are excavated with this location channel?
Andy and Amelie are nodding yes.
So you can just repeat the question aloud. Gentleman's question was, is there any prioritization of the different channels? And I think you meant slips too up near the port, right? Yeah.
Just because it is a channel.
And it's a marsh creation project.
Market project that you're
The borrow area is in the channel, correct,
It never been done.
correct,
So you're required to meet elevations.
yes.
Just to repeat the other gentleman's question, I know you work for Great Lakes, the question was, is it a requirement in order to meet certain elevations for the channel deepening? And the answer is yes.
Question, you said at the top, like with the channel maintenance, is that likely to delay the advertising?
I got it. Yeah, so the question was whether the conflict with the Chevron pipeline is likely to delay the project, and we don't expect it to. It's just a final piece of little coordination, whether it's gonna be a 200 or a 400-foot buffer.
Does the bar follow change the same width of the existing channel?
Yes,
If it does drop lower, the side slope dredging could be required.
yes.
The question was, does the borrow areas width of cut, if you will, does it stay, just a straight drop down, or does it follow some trapezoidal type of a profile?
Yeah, and it'll be a trapezoidal template for the dredging machine, yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. We do have the agenda shown here on the screen. This is our last major agenda item. We got Rudy Simino, Chief of CPRA Engineering, getting up here to talk about an IDIQ contracting update.
All right, thank you, Jacques. I just want to make a comment that I've never heard Chuck Broussard referred to as a gentleman so many times in one day. So kudos for that, Jacques. All right, so I am standing between you and I guess the shrimp ball here. I haven't heard otherwise, so we'll get through this. So we're giving an update on all things contracting here. As you guys, many people in the room know, we do a lot of work through our retainer contracts or IDIQs. So I'll provide a little bit of background on how we go about procuring those, as well as the schedules. Now we'll give some bid data at the end as to what we're seeing. So we'll talk professional services, consultant services, and I'll close it up with some construction numbers for you. So professional services contracts, generally engineering, geotechnical surveying, those sorts of things. For the most part, we procure those through a qualifications-based statement, request for solicitation of interest and qualifications. There is no cost component to that solicitation per the law. We can award one or more, maybe project specific, as you may have seen on some of our larger efforts. But for the most part, most of the work that the agency does is through our retainers, our IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. 3-year max, and we kind of have a staggered start in contract time right now, but we are looking to resolve that to get all on the same schedule, which we made some progress on in the late 2022 timeframe. So what do we use these for? All of our data collection efforts, so any surveying or geotechnical work, field investigations, laboratory work, etc. Most of our engineering and design related work, as you heard from a couple of our consultants today, that work was procured through an IDIQ, engineering services IDIQ contract. You have seen large scale efforts with project specific professional services contracts, but for the most part, for the sake of time and efficiency, we have our retainers, we use them, and that is our preference for the most part. So where do we stand in terms of the schedule and the number of those types of contracts, professional services? So these contracts that we are currently operating under today started in January of 23. They will end in January of 2025, 3 years. We have 21 total engineering services contracts, and you see the subcategories there. 16 general engineering, 5 coastal, 6 limited services. Coastal with a focus on coastal engineering as well as coastal processes and hydraulic dredging. General engineering inclusive of some coastal engineering services, but most other general heavy civil works work. And limited services, similar in scope, but with a focus and a scoring preference for Louisiana small businesses, Hudson Initiative and veteran-owned companies. And you can see their values there. 7 geotechnical services contract and 8 surveying services. So as I mentioned, these contracts that we're currently operating under today started in January of last year. They will end in December of last year, so I would say in the middle of 2025, maybe even as we get into this time next year, you'll start seeing some information on that solicitation. It is a process to get the procurements approved, the solicitations approved, and then the procurement process does take some time. And as you guys who worked for us know, it's always our goal to not have any delays through this process. Get asked a lot of questions on usage. How do we use our contracts? As many of you know, we did reduce the number of professional services IDIQ, particularly the engineering categories, just because our usage was down. So this is as of, actually, this is since January of 2023. So this is pretty up-to-date numbers. Look at a total capacity of 57 million. We've tasked about 17 million to date, sitting right below 30% on usage. So we're generally right where we want to be on the engineering services contracts. On a geotechnical, you can see we're about 19%, survey and 38%. So that's where we stand in terms of usage. When you add it all up, we execute about $1.5 million per work per month through these contracts, our retainer contracts, 1.5 million per month. Consultant services, very similar. This is the other side of the shop in terms of environmental science and planning. Once again, predominantly IDIQ. We have had some project-specific consultant services contracts. Key difference here is it's a request for proposal that includes a cost component. It's actually the rate sheet, and that rate sheet does have a scoring formula associated with it. So there is a cost-based component to this solicitation per law. 3 years, so we are on a 3-year schedule. You can see here we have 10 total with a $3 million dollar cap max on them. These are a little bit of a stagger, but one thing to note, and this may be the last time you hear about these contracts before you start getting into the solicitation period, is we are advertising for these in the fall of 24. And as many of you know, once it is advertised, there is a blackout period, so you won't hear very much from us in terms of the details of that. Looking at the usage, so you got a total of 36 million. We've tasked about 10 million of that, right around 30% up to date. Construction, and this is if you've seen me present in the last several months, you've probably seen some of these slides. I did update the numbers with our most recent bid data, but as you guys know, starting in the first quarter of 2022, cost estimating and bidding became a very dicey thing for public agencies as well as any other agency. But you can see here, particularly on longer contracts, as you guys saw today, we did have several 400- or 500-day contracts. It did become a risk in terms of price volatility, supply chain inflation, etc. So let's look at the numbers. Since Q1 of 22, we opened bids on 17 projects. You can see their average number of bidders, projects with 3 bidders or less, etc. The key thing to focus on is the total low bid summed up versus the total of the engineer's estimates. And you can see we missed that mark by about 18%. So we fell at about a $35 million deficit in that time frame. A couple projects were for the most part so far off budget they were not awarded. So what that tells you is of the 1715, although for the most part a lot of them were below budget or above budget or above the engineer's estimate, we were able to reduce scope or find additional funds to award those projects. So I do think that is our commitment to moving forward our mission and getting creative in some cases to get these projects moving forward. Things did improve, as many of you know. So when you only look at Q1 of 23 to present, we opened bids, and this is an overlap of the bid, but I'm just looking at Q1 to present. Open bids on 8 projects, same general and average number of bids, etc. You see there total low bids 67 million, total of the engineer's estimate 66 million, so you missed about 2%. It is a combination of prices getting a little lower. Fuel prices did come down, as we do know. Things got a little more back to normal in terms of the post-COVID world. But at the other end of that spectrum, engineer estimates use the recent bid data, and you saw engineer estimates actually become more conservative, higher contingencies. So you can see there we did have one unawarded bid. But for the most part, when you look at how the agency is handling this, our mission is still to deliver the projects. There have been a couple instances where the costs were a little bit really over the budget to a certain degree where we could not award it. But we always look to award the project. We have had the luxury of finding additional funds, whether it be through the legislature or CPRA or some of our other programs when the bids were close enough. We have begun to utilize our alternate bids more than we ever have, up to 3 in most cases. That gives us the ability to at least award the base and move as quickly as possible into construction. As you saw, we've rejected bids for the most part. For those of you who are fairly new to doing work for the agency, if you go to our homepage, there is a small cartoon excavator there that holds all of our solicitations. The next window looks something like this. If you're interested in professional and consultant services, the green box on the right, construction, which is under contracts and procurement, be on the left. One thing to note too, if you look to the left side, you see the archives tab. All of our past awards as well as contract selections are posted there. You can go download the bid packages as well as the solicitation. So if you are interested and new to our work and you want to look at the past RFPs and RSIQs as well as the past bid packages, you can find that information right there in the archive. I think that is my last slide. Yes, we do have no time for additional questions or conversations. So we will actually adjourn. I think most of us will be over at the social event. So we can, if anybody would like to have some conversations there, I'm happy to participate as well as any of the folks. Thanks to Jacques Boudreau for keeping us on track for the most part. And thanks to the engineering division staff who continue to impress me every time I see them present these things. And the amount of hard work that goes into a 6-minute presentation, it's really several years of work. So everybody, the engineers here and the consultants, it's a lot of work. We asked them to get it down to a 6 or 7 minute presentation and did a fine job to give the relevant information. So kudos on that. And thanks everyone for participating and thanks for the audience for questions. And that's it. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, everybody.